We may have a few more people straggling in, but I want to thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the British American Business Council and, of course, Hult International Business School and Pete Bagley, the faculty, and, of course, the students, thank you for joining us today. I want to thank you especially since I started my day at the dentist this morning, so I'd rather see you guys. So the impetus for today's talk and inviting the panel came from a study I read about 2 years ago, and it said 60 to 70% of US CEOs said AI in the next 10 years is going to ruin the world. Now, that seems a little bit extreme, and if you've watched the news the last few days, you know polling can be inaccurate because the IDC did a study this year, and 86% of American CEOs say AI is their #1 strategic vision for their business. It's their future. Now, you guys all have been probably immersed in AI in some way, shape, or form, but I thought it might be good to find out what's real. You know, Hollywood has these movies that make you think the world is going to be taken over. I suspect that's a little bit of fantasy. And so what we did is I brought in 3 experts, and we're going to ask them some questions. We have people online as well who also may ask some questions from Canada, the UK, and across the US. So I want to thank you all for being part of it. And if you do have real questions during the course of our conversation here, please speak up, and we will do our best to address them. So what I've asked our speakers to do is to do a quick intro. Suma, Steve, and Missy will tell you where they're from, but they are practical, hands-on, real-life AI experts, and I'd like them to share their journey and what their visions are for the future, and then let's get into the Q&A right away. So let me turn it over. Suma, you're up first.
It's such a pleasure being you, and very nice to see all of you and a lot of young minds, which is very exciting because you are the future of where technology is going. But a little bit about me. I'm a technologist background, and I studied in the University of Chicago, a master's, and I have been working with PKFOD Davies as the head of technology advisory. We advise firms on all technology initiatives. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is taking the forefront, given where the technology is going at the moment. But we also consult on ERP systems, CRM systems, and a lot of other technology initiatives. In terms of what we advise on, it ranges from we are here, we want to get to X, we want to save costs, we want to grow efficiency. What do we do? What technologies do we bring in? How do we improve processes? How do we go about doing it? What are the compliance issues? What are the regulatory issues? Can you help us with the implementation? Can you recommend partners? So the list goes on. Just to kind of fast forward, what some of the key trends that we are seeing as a part of artificial intelligence tools and large language models as they're really evolving at a very rapid pace is when you're in the crowd, when you're already adopting it, you're learning it, you're in the middle of it all, and you hear the questions and you see the trends in the market, there's still a lot of skepticism and fear to some extent on how to adopt it. Do we adopt it? Do we really need it? There's a stigma for change in terms of real adoption. So that's what we are seeing. And I think advocacy, continuous education on the amazing things this technology can bring to the world is the key to really eliminating a lot of the barriers to adoption. So I'm here to really take your questions and have a productive conversation. So.
Thanks, Suma. Oops. Thanks, Suma. Appreciate that. My name is Steve Kenniston. Again, as Suma, very nice to be greeted by all of you, and thank you very much for attending. It's really impressive to see such a great turnout. My role, I am the cybersecurity lead for Dell Technologies and I sit in a very unique position across their entire portfolio. And how that pertains to AI is my response. I talk about Dell as being the largest security company you've never heard of, right? Because we think of security capabilities built into your servers, into your networking, into your storage, into your data protection tools. And all of those components make up your Gen AI infrastructure. And that Gen AI infrastructure Dell has actually put a model together called the Dell AI Factory. And as a part of putting that whole thing together, it wasn't just about how does AI work and pertain to all those things and what are the necessary tools and capabilities. It's how do you make sure that as we deliver this architecture to a customer, that it's met with the proper security guidance, the proper ethics guidance that may have to go into it, all of these things into that solution. So I sit on that board with everybody to think about as they are adding componentry to that, how does it affect security? What does it matter? What things do I need to be thinking about? And it's really important, and it's probably over 50% of the people interviewed say security is one of the biggest barriers to entry when implementing AI. Again, more on the fear side because they just don't know. It's an easy thing to get over. It's how do you do that? And hopefully we can shed a little light on that today. And I'll pass it to Missy.
Hi, my name is Missy Trumpler, and I am the interim CEO right now of a startup company called AgileAI Labs. I do not have a primarily tech background. My background is sustainability and sustainable business operations. And I got involved with AgileAI Labs because as a sustainable business person, you could see the writing on the wall that AI was going to be adopted in pretty much everything that we're doing. And sustainability for me, this has been my life's work for the past 25 years. So knowing that this is where we were headed and some of the great benefits that come out of AI is how to adopt those ethically and efficiently so that we are striking a balance in moving forward. And when I stumbled across this company, how it came about is kind of interesting and organic, but the way I got involved with this company is they have created this platform that is agnostic to all types of businesses. And the platform addresses software development and how to do software development more efficiently so there's quality that's being embedded into your software from the beginning of the development phase. So we work with requirements and testing in particular. And that being the case, when I saw the way that this platform addressed software development, it was kind of a mind-blowing aha moment for me that if we can look at that and apply that technology throughout all companies and improve productivity while we're striking a balance with proper ethics, transparency, that is the most sustainable way that we can go. And of course, there is an energy side to it that we can talk about at some point too, if you have questions around that. But we really are getting our arms around what the energy output and draw is related to AI. And a lot of the companies involved with AI are not exactly forthcoming with that information. But we are going to be able to harness a lot of phenomenal technologies and tackle a lot of serious problems in the healthcare industry, in transportation, in every industry you can think of. And if we use AI properly as a tool and think of it as a sustainability tool, as well as a productivity and efficiency tool, we can truly change the way that we are doing business. So that's what I'm involved in.
Right. Great. So in my real life, I run a marketing firm, and one of my clients asked me recently, and it is a household international name company. And they asked me, Rick, in your next project with us, can you do it all in ChatGPT and tell me your experience and whether we should apply it throughout our company? It's like, you don't have experts in-house to do this. But as a marketing guy, I always say I can do anything. So that's good. So my first question, Suma, goes to you is, as you coach companies and as they look to adopt different AI technologies, what are the most frequently heard questions, or what are the questions companies should be asking before they dive full face in?
First thing, I'll point out to three things that I see most commonly used. The first thing is you can all guess, is my data safe? How is it safe? How can you make sure it's safe? So it's all around data privacy, especially with regards to company or client-related data. Number two, how do we go about adopting it? The growth is tremendous. If we do it today, are we going to fall behind tomorrow? Is it worth investing in the capital now, or should we wait? Number three, in terms of the actual process of adoption, can you help us with a strategy and a framework? Can you actually suggest tools? Or do you suggest we go about building something on our own? What is the way we go about doing it? Can you recommend vendors? Do we need a budget? And how can we help? Like, what kind of advice will we need with very little technology staff in-house? These are the most common questions that we are seeing coming from our audience. And many of you in the audience, I'm sure, know a lot more, maybe even about on the data privacy issues and how the technology companies are solving for it. The growth is tremendous, and the solutions recommended are also definitely changing. In my experience, what I've said to my prospective clients a year ago is very different from what I'm telling them now. So.
Thank you. Steve, I don't know if you heard, but there was an election here in the US the other day, and now all the conspiracy theorists are out, and there's some doozies out there. For example, I just heard that Elon Musk changed the votes through satellites. What are the cybersecurity issues? What are people afraid of? What are there technologies that are being taking over and taking advantage of people? Kind of tell us, what are people afraid of, and what should we be aware of?
I'm glad you brought that up, Rick. So much like Suma mentioned before, when her company advises on strategies, you talk about ERP, you talk about CRM, we're obviously talking about Gen AI. Today, Gen AI is a workload. Much like ERP is a workload, Gen AI is a workload, CRM is a workload. You want to be able to practice good cyber hygiene across all of those platforms, because when you say, Rick, what are you afraid of? What are they afraid of being attacked? It's the biggest piece is data. And while each of those workloads have different ways of accessing data, different ways of extracting data, different people have different needs for different pieces of that data, I think at the end of the day, what the executives want to make sure is happening is that the right people have the right access to the right information. Now, in a Gen AI world, there are a number of ways to be able to alter that. Is it model training? Is it prompt injection? There are a number of things. How do you ensure that at each step along that process, you're making sure that the right people are interacting with the data such that you are confident that when the data comes out of the system, it's highly reliable, right? So a lot of things that a lot of companies want to make sure of is when they're providing information, especially if they're using Gen AI to provide information back to customers, that data is accurate. I think we've all seen the notion a couple of years ago about an attorney running short on time, pumped his question into ChatGPT, and it gave him back a whole bunch of gave him back a whole bunch of information. He submitted that as a brief, and that brief was 100% wrong. He was fined, he was sanctioned, right? And it's getting much better today. There are safeguards being put in place to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen anymore. But that, I think, is the biggest concern.
What about on a day-to-day basis? Somebody's on social media and they see an ad, they see a video of someone, and it wasn't real. It wasn't the real person. How can a viewer of social media, user of social media, understand or know or realize that they're being spoon-fed something that's not true?
I think the biggest part of that, in fact, I was just in a session the other day, early last week, where there was an image. What was the recent hurricane we just had, or the flooding? Milton down south, right? There was a image of a girl holding her dog, and an official, a senator or someone, said, "This is catastrophic. We're really sad," and it brings up all these emotions. And we later found out that picture was false. And instantly, the senator jumped on that and said, "Well, I don't care, because this elicits a kind of emotion that I want to elicit." So are they tugging at the heartstrings, or are they tugging at the reality of the situation, right? And so The biggest thing I think that it comes down to, at least for the consumers of that content, is education and training. Because it's going to get better. It's going to get so much better, you won't be able to tell the difference. But there may be little nuances in some of these images that you need to be able to identify to make sure of what you're looking at, right? And it's not just one thing, right? If that was a real thing, it would be all over from multiple people. You know, doing a little bit of homework, doing a little bit of research becomes more helpful.
Missy, I know AgileAI Labs does work in the UK. Thank you from the British American Business Council. But what are the obstacles? What are the questions? What are the fears? What are the excuses for not diving into AI that you hear most from companies?
Interestingly enough, the UK and the EU have actually are adopting AI at a quicker rate than we are here. Part of that is because of the instability that we've been experiencing and the fear has gone on around the election. Economic instability that we don't know from one day to the next. Is our economy great or is our economy falling apart? Because we're hearing it all the time. Well, they don't really have those issues over there. Plus, in addition, the European Union passed the Artificial Intelligence Act in August of 2024. That just came to pass August 1st. And the UK also put out some rules back in March of 2023 around AI, just as we did, where we had, I think Biden put out executive orders last April, right? So the way they're all looking at it, every area is looking at it a little bit differently. With the EU, they are regulating it a little bit more heavily, which is giving more, they feel more confident, the companies there, in adopting AI. Whereas in the UK, they're taking a very innovative approach. The key for them is they want to businesses to continue to innovate. So they're holding back on regulating legally, and they're putting it in the hands of different commissioners and commission structures as to how they're going to create those laws eventually. And here in the United States, I think we're all more concerned in a different way because with the way our election just came to pass, we've got, we have pretty much the coming president is very chummy with someone who is building AI, and AI is taking AI to another level that none of us can even comprehend yet. So there's a lot of different aspects to it, but because of the fact that there are regulations in the EU, they've been more quick to adopt. Here, everything's kind of been a wait and see, but it's all about, number one, transparency. Because when you're dealing, there's so many AI platforms out there. And if they're not sharing with you, like our platform, one of the things that we make sure is that our customers see is exactly what the AI is doing. A lot of AI companies and platforms do not do that. They hide that because however they're prompting it or they're training their own AI, they're not sharing that with the customer. It's important that you do that with the customer because if you don't know what the AI is doing, then you don't know where the data is coming from. And even more importantly, you don't know where your data is going. That's the biggest concern. Because if you're putting PII, personal proprietary information, into ChatGPT, which is happening, by the way, like 82% of companies in one of the last things that I read, have employees that are busy, like the attorney that got himself in a lot of trouble. He's not the only one. There have been several attorneys that have done that too. You'd think they learned by now. Sports Illustrated, I think the editor got fired because of doing the same kind of nonsense. So people are thinking, oh, I'll just go use ChatGPT because that'll help me because that's how we used to use Google, right? But the problem is that anything that they're putting up into ChatGPT that is not filtered or is not secure is being absorbed. So if you're putting personal information of your company, even if you don't think it's that proprietary, that could come out as an answer to your competitor if they're asking a similar question. So it's a free for all that's been happening truly here in the United States. And until we get some level of regulation, I know for a lot of people, regulation is a dirty word. For a sustainability person, it's not, because if you don't have regulation, then you're exposing yourself to things that you don't even know you're exposing yourself to. And exactly the problem you were just discussing with, like, how do you know if something's fake or real? Well, until we start putting some guardrails around that, and young people are so much better at being able to distinguish this. Older people, we are not trained to do that. You've been trained for this from the time you were old enough that your parents handed you, your little, their laptop or their phone to say, here, work, keep yourself busy. Well, for us, we have to make sure we're wearing our glasses, that we can see, like, is that a real person, or are they just too perfect to be real? So all of that is really pushbacks that you're seeing on a bigger scale with enterprise clients in particular. They want security. They want transparency. They want to make sure all their information is locked down. And we've done that. We started doing that right from the beginning. But still, for us, we're having to create an on-premises install in order to make sure that their data is secure on both sides, what they're putting out and what they're taking in. And it's key. That's the hardest part.
Thank you, Missy. So before turning it over to the audience here, I got a question from a viewer in the UK via Zoom, and it's to anybody. And the question is, when we use products like ChatGPT and we turn it over to the marketing department, how do we protect ourselves from it not sucking in copyrighted information or intellectual property that's out in the public domain? How do you protect yourself? So who'd ever like to take that question?
Copyright around AI has become one of the biggest issues. I recently spoke with a copyright lawyer that's dealing with artificial intelligence. They are trying to come up with rules and regulatory compliance around quoting the source, especially around artwork that you put into ChatGPT. With the whole multimodal AI becoming more and more popular now, it's becoming more of an issue. Can you really prevent it? No. Once the image is put out there, I think that technology companies, the way they're trying to address this is absorb the copyright the way it is separately being documented for artwork, but not necessarily for, say, poetry or books. If it's exactly snippet of information, brought out of Shakespeare, potentially can it recognize it as this? It was rewritten by X person. None of that is. So there is a lot of copyright law that's being debated and in the works that we are know of. And a lot of lawyers are just making a lot of money, as I know it. And I think you all know there was a New York Times article or Wall Street article about a company. I think New York Post was sued about quoting something on copyright that they shouldn't have.
Just to complement what someone was saying is one of the biggest challenges, and I think it kind of came out of what you were saying, is this is not necessarily a technology issue. It's more of a person issue. So I've talked about my entire career about data classification. And in my early days, it was a little bit easier because there was less data. But like with data growing so much, right, it's getting more and more difficult. And there are more and more different types of categories of data. Is it copywritten? Does it have watermarks on it? And in order to prevent that stuff from going in, you have to have good rules. So, for example, at Dell, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. I mean, you can use it, but if you use it, you have to go through a bunch of hoops and a bunch of warnings and that sort of thing to try to prevent that. I just did a briefing with a customer the other day, Siemens, right? They wanted to make sure. They asked me specifically, what technology is out there to prevent one of their engineers from putting one of their detailed drawings into one of these tools such that, to your point before, if I ask the question, how do I know my competitor isn't going to see that answer, which might be bad for me, right, as a company. So you have to rely on the person and where are you doing it? One of Dell's thoughts in around their AI factory is doing more things on-prem where you have a little bit more control vis-a-vis in the cloud. Because on-prem, you have a little bit more control about where you use things. I mean, I'm a bit of a cynic too. I think it's a little bit self-serving that Dell says that because they sell computers, but not cloud storage. But they're not wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, you do have a little bit more control there, right? So having that control allows you to control your employees and what they're putting in there a little bit more. If you're classifying the data, if you're a big security thing, I think most of you probably know about is network segmentation. If you're segmenting not only your networks, but your employees, who has access to what, you can kind of control that a little bit more. But it really comes down to the person, not necessarily technology.
I'm going to add a little bit to that too, because one of the ways that we address that as well is that we make sure with the platform that we have that any customer that we are dealing with is we containerize them. Their data stays within their container. And yes, we have to, we're eliciting information that comes from our chat bot but what happens is we have guardrails that have been created, and our platform has been in development for about 2 years. So it's been 2 years of training AI so that we're getting very specific information that we're looking for. So there is no hallucinations allowed, because that's a big thing. That's what was happening also with that attorney, is that the reason why it's not like he just turned it in and didn't read it. It came back with actual case names that were a real case name. But then the information associated with the case name was a completely different case that had nothing to do with the case name that it pulled. So the problem is there's no way to validate what's coming from ChatGPT unless you're building guardrails around it and you're getting very specific as how you're absorbing and filtering that information. So, and you can containerize organizations as well as taking things on premises.
So we're going to turn it over to the crowd for any questions, but I have a question for the students here at Hult International Business School is, how many of you are using tools like ChatGPT in your day-to-day work? Just a show of hands would be great. Yeah. Wow, that's pretty interesting. And now, are you pleased with the results? Is it a powerful, useful tool, or is it still not ready for prime time? I'd love your input on it. Any comments? Do you find your ability to use it is maturing and you're getting better at it? Very good, thank you. Anybody else have a comment?
I will start by saying everybody should be using AI, right? There's no not using it. That's not going to work. Understanding education around data, what you can put in, that your data is, especially in a general environment, if you're using enterprise-focused ChatGPT, which now a lot of the companies are doing, starting to adopt private clouds in terms of not getting your data exposed to the outside, it's one story. But when you're signing up for a general ChatGPT 4.0, you're signing up for your data to be out. I think most of you already understand that once you put something out there, your data is out there. working within those guardrails itself is empowering. You should use it. I've written business plans using AI without entering any client information. I've given pictures and asked it to describe how it does. It does it. I've asked it for talking points. It does it. So it really makes life very efficient and useful. So use it, but understand that your data is out there and can it be out there? And also, the good thing is, given that it is exposed now to the data out in the internet, hallucinations have gone down. It's able to give sources very clearly. Anthropic is doing it better than ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is catching up much better. Google Bard is behind. Some of these large language models have really catching up to responding to the issues around hallucinations or biases, making sure that the data is more comprehensive and how they're training the data. So I think that the technology companies are really responding fabulously to the concerns out there, like coming up with models like Enterprise ChatGPT, which are SOC 2 compliant, which really help clients adopt. So that's what I say.
SOC 2 is a security regulatory compliance requirement, just in case. I didn't know what that was a couple of years ago. I was like, what's that? I have SOC 1, give me SOC 2.
Thank you for sharing your sock talk.
I think, Peter, to even go a step further to answer your question is to take it out of the context of the technology itself and just talk about practice, right? How do students get better at using these tools? It's nothing more than practice. I mean, when I started using it 2 years ago, you're right. You put in a prompt and you get something back. Yeah, that's not quite right. Then you ask it again and you say, you give it a little bit more detail. You go until you finally start to learn what types of details you can give it to get what you want. And then it's a pendulum, right? So you're going to give it too much detail. When I say too much, I don't necessarily mean trade secrets, but maybe not thinking you say, we do this, so can you do that? And this part is something proprietary to what you do. You'll start to learn to get careful with that type of stuff, but it's really about practicing and just keep using it until you, and be inquisitive of yourself, right? As you ask it a question, say, can I get something better? Ask it a different way, or put in a little bit more detail until you start to see the results. And is it closer to what you want? Is it a better answer to what you want? That type of thing.
The other thing I'm going to recommend is that also consider what type of tool that you're equipping yourself with. Because, for example, like the platform that we have, I told you it really assists with the software development process. And part of the software development process is gathering requirements. And our platform literally trains the user how to write better requirements. So the AI is helping to teach you how to function better within that space. So you can use AI just to, if you're equipped with the right tools, those tools will help teach you exactly how to use them. And they also get better as you are using them. And keep in mind, you can ask AI the same question twice and it will not come back with the same answer, which is also interesting because at one point it may give you 4 different things to consider in an answer. And then on the next one, it could give you 6 and include those 4 or have 4 others with 2 that are the same from the first. So the more you use it, also the smarter it's getting too with how to respond to you.
All right, thanks you guys. Open it up now. Anybody else have any AI related questions? I'll turn it over to you. Would you like this little vape or would you like to speak up?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I fairly intact, or would you influence out of control? There is a conversation around artificial general intelligence, I'm sure you've heard. which is a little different from a large language model or generative AI, where this is generative AI is more conversational, where it's responding to a query based on the data it has. Artificial general intelligence is actually understanding and creating a perceptive point of view and applying it in situations as needed. So it's actually working on its own as the human mind. What we are seeing and technologists are saying is we are around 10 years away from AGI to come into picture, right? That is almost acting like a real human mind, because you're applying the intelligence in different situations based on what you think you should do, just like we would all do. I think when it comes to that point, I would not be surprised if it's not for one big cloud of data, but a huge amount of data sharing through regulations per se. But there's always a non-regulation around regulation. Like, you just never know. So that's the part where I think the human conscience, like the human ethical value system, plays a big role on how we use the intelligence that we have built.
How many of you does that scare? I mean, honestly, let's be real. Because it scares the hell out of me when I think about it. It does, especially with human ethics, because there are wonderfully ethical people in the world, and there are some that are not. That's the scariest part. Just like nuclear. When nuclear was created, right? Nuclear as a form of energy can be the cleanest form of energy there is. And now with like what they're learning with the nuclear waste and that there actually are ways to do nuclear without creating that waste, nuclear is a great thing, right? For that aspect. But when you look at what can also be done on the devastation side, this is why we need regulations, and this is why we need to make sure that things are being contained, you know? And honestly, as human beings, that's our job, because we're the ones that hold companies accountable. We're the ones that hold the people that are working on these things accountable and hold them to a better standard. So that's why it's important that people, rather than be afraid of it, you have to understand it. And you have to do your best in order to keep these things under control. Because if we don't, we do have plenty of movies to show us what could potentially happen. But in the meantime, and we're just going to accelerate ourselves there, because if we use AI well and choose good tools and applications, let me tell you, we'll get to those 10 years even quicker.
Can I ask a question to the audience? Yeah. How many of you are writing GPTs by yourself now to do a task? Okay. Have you written groups of GPTs to perform a series of tasks? Kind of. You're exploring it. So if you are subscribing into ChatGPT, you can create your own GPTs, correct? So you can create GPTs to do a task. Like, I loaded a PDF, like a 300-page PDF. I have 5 questions that I want to go pull out of various sections of this book. It's, say, an audit rule book, whatever. And I want it to go pull the answers at various points in time. So I give the 5 questions, I load the PDF, I tell it what to do. It'll do it on its own. Or I want it to go book airline tickets to Turkey, it'll go do it on its own. A human element is not needed. I just give it what I want, and it does it. So you can now do it if you're subscribed to ChatGPT. You can do wonders with what we call GPT agents. If you're subscribed to GPT, I highly advise you to try using it.
I'm going to take this, at least for our part of the atmosphere, of the stratosphere, is for software development. First of all, having worked for a very long time now, probably longer than you've been on the planet. I don't know a lot of people that are our age that work that are not overworked, that are not overwhelmed by the amount of work that they have on their plates. And like, for example, with our platform, it applies to software development in that process. Well, folks in software development are 80, like, I think it's something like 83% of those folks are burnout is one of the most common problems because they're working 24/7. You know, these applications never shut down. Our platform will do 36 hours of manual work intelligently in less than 6 minutes. Now, what that does is for some of the people that I work alongside of on the leadership team, literally when they saw our product to begin with, they were like, I actually would have gotten sleep for all those years that I was chasing down bugs, chasing down defects, because we pretty much eradicate those. They still exist here, in a few of them, but it helps so much in the productivity and performance. AI right now, I know she said that, well, you really don't need a human, but for the most part in business, they want a human. Because just like when you put something into Chat GPT, don't you read it and go, okay, this kind of says what I'd like to say, and the structure is there, but it doesn't sound like me. So you rewrite it, right? And you make changes to it to make it sound like yourself, or to make it sound maybe even more intelligent, or to apply the way you want it to apply. I don't see AI yet going rogue off on its own. You need people to work those jobs. And so for some, yes, it is going to displace some people, but not for a little while yet. So the more people embrace it and the more they understand how to use it too, the more it's going to, the more jobs are going to open up for them to be able to use it. The problem right now is there aren't enough people that know about AI, right, to get hired in. You guys are going to be way ahead of the game, not because of this session maybe, but if you're learning AI and you can use GPTs, it's going to help you get a job because you're going to be confronted with all of this.
I'll tell you, as a marketer, one of my clients is a big imaging company in healthcare, and the radiologists are scared to death of AI, not because they're necessarily going to lose their job, but they're going to be shown to be less effective as what the AI intelligence tells you. So I think it's going to be a marketing challenge as well to coach and share to radiologists saying, we're going to free up your time to focus on cases you're interested in. We are going to let you analyze data across millions of scans of, say, breast cancer. You're going to be better at your job and you're going to get some life back. And I think if we start telling people that, there's going to be less fear about taking jobs away. But I think your PhD is vital. So you're hired. Yeah. We only have a couple of minutes left. Are there any more questions?
All right. That's a really good question. I don't track it, but I'm sure someone at the executive level tracks it. I think the answer to that question comes down to each individual person. So, for example, for myself, I'm in marketing as Rick is as well. We have a bunch of tools in our marketing organization to be able to use that are AI based, right? That we can leverage. And I'm probably the oldest in our group. So when I see something come across, and I try to be a little bit more on the creative side, less very kind of Dell regimented. I told you I'm a cynic, right? So when I read something that comes out of one of these tools and I just kind of scratch my head and I go, that's not very interesting. You know, we can do better, right? That's when I then take the initiative to say, how would ChatGPT do it? Or how would Perplexity do it? Or how would one of these other tools do it? And I pump in the question, and I go through the hoops and accept all the things. And yes, I can get fired if I do the wrong thing. And I put in the question and I see the results, and I kind of compare the two. And sometimes I'll use some of each. Sometimes I'll say, "Nah, you're right. This one was better." Or maybe ChatGPT is way better. And then I have a conversation either with my boss or somebody and says, I did it this way, which I hope is okay. And I think it gives us a better result. I don't know. I think most people do it that way, but I don't know that there's a particular rule of thumb where people just, maybe some people, to Rick's point, who are not very good at their job, automatically jump to it and just use it, right? To try to stay ahead or get the sleep that they want or whatever. But I mean, I think it's a gray area there. Not very helpful, I'm sure, but.
All right, a couple more questions. Yeah, I love that question. So as a marketer, when I would hire people, I would always give them a writing test. I'd say, interview me and write a press release or write a one-page article on what you heard. And writing skills are critical. Now, when I talk with people, I say, all right, here's the assignment. I'll come up with, okay, Schwinn Bicycles is going to launch a new bike. Use ChatGPT and write the announcement press release. But I want it to be powerful and well-written and distinctive. And 9 out of 10 times I get bland, like there's nothing interesting or sexy about it. But the prospective employee who gives me something that the grunt work's been done, but then they polish it up and finesse it, they're the ones that get hired. So show me that you can finesse, show me that you can think strategically, and show me that you can personality into writing, because the stuff I see out of most AI-generated stuff is just blah. And my agency never does blah. Just ask all my clients.
Well, let me answer a little bit more on that, because that's marketing. But as Suma was saying, learning how to write, how to use ChatGPT agents and direct the GPTs, I think that also is going to give you an edge, because you need to understand how to point them and focus them to use them, as well as just to inquire information from them.
The other part of my question is, what would you do right now to improve the value in general?
I would say there are very few people who really can summarize the landscape of AI in very simple terms. One of the people that I follow very closely is Professor Ramakrishna from MIT. He's a professor of artificial intelligence and data science. I don't know if you all already heard of him, and if you have not, he posts a lot of YouTube videos for students on actually how to use ChatGPT on your day-to-day to make your life extremely efficient. It starts from really summarizing artificial intelligence into GPT agents, autonomous agents, writing a large language model, writing Python. Now you don't even need to really fully know Python, right? You can modify Python code. So really, what do they do? What do they mean? How do you tackle them? Also understanding the APIs that are being built on top of the large language models. The vertical system is now increasing, where there are a lot of tools that are being built on using the APIs of OpenAI and Anthropic, and just performing very narrow tasks. Like there's a tool called Gamma that I use that does PowerPoints in 2 minutes, fantastic PowerPoints. I don't spend 5 hours to do PowerPoints. Of course, I come up with the content, but it comes up with the draft. So there are a lot of such tools. So if you start understanding the landscape of how to use AI, not just generative AI, but understanding the extensions, the APIs, the tools, the vertical tools that are being built to perform these specific tasks, it's extremely useful for you to go into an interview and kind of show that you have the experience and the exposure. So I recommend looking into some of these AI leaders out there, the top voices out there that you should go follow to keep yourself up to date on what's happening and specifically for this purpose.
One more question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask because in one of our classes, we're taking complex decision making right now. And we're comparing it to AI, which we have been doing it for a while. So that's more of a professional kind of view, but also a personal kind of view, understanding that humans, part of our intelligence is to make those kind of decisions that lead our life. Like, who am I gonna marry? Who is definitely a life-changing decision. Or is AI not ready for it? Should we wait?
I mean, if I have to answer that, if you don't mind, I think decision making is also requires emotional intelligence. It's a very crucial aspect to make sound decisions for yourself or for your company. It's not about the technology being ready or not. I would always make sure that the emotional intelligence is a big part of that final decision. And hence, I personally would not recommend that to my clients. I would say get all your input and you decide.
All right, you guys have been awesome. Thank you very much for hanging out, listening to us. I do want to thank the Hult International Business School, Pete Bagley and crew, and all the students and faculty for making this possible. Thank you very much for your participation. The speakers are going to be joining us next door for refreshment. Please join us if you're able. And as the president of the British American Business Council, I urge you to log on to their website, BABCNE.org. And you'll learn about our upcoming Christmas luncheon, which is on December 6th, I believe. It is the party of the century every year. So please log on. Please try to join us for that event. But thank you all for joining us. And please come next door and schmooze with our guests. Cheers.